Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Lee from L&R Models, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to create a really cool pine tree to add to your dioramas. I'm going to be adding the pine tree to my demo model here, and I'll show you how I made it. So in this video we're going to be looking at making a 20-foot tall pine tree to go into a back garden or a house, or just a small tree for the diorama. So I'm going to use a bamboo stick or a barbecue skewer for the trunk. And for a 20-foot tall tree, that represents around 6 meters in height in metric. So that scales down to 79 millimeters, approximately 8 centimeters. So I'm going to mark off 8 squares here, leaving a little bit at the bottom to skewer the tree eventually into the landscape. And I'm just going to add a little bit of height at the top to taper off. So using a scalpel, I'll trim the top of that off, and then we can begin tapering. It's a bit tricky cutting with a scalpel, so I'll just rip the end of it off, and like a good Boy Scout with a little bit of whittling, just use a scalpel to thin the top of that trunk off. So for the next part of this, we're going to need some string. This is the garden twine, the same that I used in the last video. I'll just link that up in the caption there. So unfortunately I got this a bit wrong in terms of setting up the camera, but we're just going to snip off a pile of pieces just about the same length as the branches are going to be. So lots of string pieces, just keep snipping away till you've got a pile. And now we're going to make the paste, pushing those strings to one side. So this is some brown acrylic, some PVA glue and some plaster of Paris. Just mixing that up all together now until we get a smooth paste, making sure we get the brown paint mixed into it thoroughly. The brown paint's not really too important here, it's self-colouring. If anything happens to chip the paste off, etc., it's going to be coloured all the way through rather than revealing the white underneath. Now, going back to the bamboo stick that we created, just going to paint on the paste, making sure it's all fully covered. Now, this is going to take several layers to do to get it right, but the initial idea is to get it covered. You can use a hairdryer to speed up the process a little bit. It's better to leave it to dry naturally, but once the first layer is dried, you can just keep applying layers, making it thicker at the bottom to simulate that natural way that a pine tree would grow, in terms of the trunk being thicker at the bottom, although they do tend to grow quite straight. And moving back to the string, we've separated out those initial little bits of string into flatter fibres. These are going to be our branches. So what I need to do now is make a little jig. I'm going to clamp these pair of mole grips to the table using a C-clamp. And once that jig is secured in place, I've got a nice little clip. Now I can take a piece of thin jeweler's wire. This is about 0.25 millimeters thick, 0.2 millimeters thick, something like that. I was given it by a friend that used to make wire trees, so I've had quite a large supply of it. Anyway, just twist those ends so we can seal them together, and then we're going to clamp those into the mole grips. Then I'm going to take this little hook here, secure it in the end of the loop, and slowly and carefully feed in some of those fibre strands into the loop, just making sure that they're mostly centred. What I want to try and do here is create 2 branches, so I'm going to thin them out so there's a little gap in the middle. What to do then is take hold of the hook and then gently twist it round until all those fibres are captured between the wires. What you can do here is actually put the hook that I'm using there into a chuck of a drill, and with low torque just gently spin it. But for 2 reasons: I didn't actually have a working drill at this point and I wanted to do it by hand. So just twist it round until you've eventually caught all the fibres up. What you'll then have is a nice little strand like this. You see those branches, so put that to one side and we're just going to make several more. And at this point I want to drill some little holes in the side of the trunk using a micro drill, and then we're going to start gluing our branches in, dip it into the super glue and slot it into those holes that we've pre-drilled. Takes a bit of adjustment here, and we can speed up the process with some activator spray. Comes in very useful, this stuff. Then just continue around the foot of the trunk, adding more branches like so. And as you go, you can drill more holes and trim the pieces accordingly until you've got a little build up like so. Just have to work around as you put it on. We're going to do a bit more of a trim later on, but you can trim a bit as you go, and as you can see now we're starting to build up the branch pieces, so I can just try and pull them into shape. I'm going to fine tune this later on as well. So at this point here I decided to just smooth out some of the branches with a little wire brush. This just helps to space out those branches a little bit better, and again all the way up, drilling and adding, and we soon build up a nice little tree shape. Just take a little bit of time, and the further you go up the smaller branches you can add. It's a very long process, so I've just speeded it up a little bit here. Get towards the top now, just drilling and positioning as we go, and we end up with something a little bit like this. It's now going to need a little bit of shaping to get it into the final shape we want. It takes a lot of pruning and positioning. Use a pair of scissors to just thin out those branches and just generally work all the way up the tree again until you get in the sort of shape that you want. As you can see, it looks rather scruffy at this point, but we are actually getting somewhere, and you've just got to trust the process. And now just use that wire brush again. This is a softer one, it's the nylon fibres rather than metal fibres, but we can just try and now give the tree a little bit of a hairstyle. It helps with the brushing, it just smooths those string fibres down a bit. And then once you've done that, with a little bit of tweaking with your fingers, you can then start to pull and prod the branches into the kind of shape you want, and then you eventually get something a little bit like this. And with that, it's time to give it an undercoat. So I've taken it out into the garage and given it a spray of brown from a rattle can, and now I'm just going to paint the trunk with a light brown colour. Just going to do this by hand using a paintbrush. Just painting all the way around the trunk. It's just to give it a bit of more of a definition. And I'm going to paint some of the middle bits just to highlight those, and a bit at the top there. And now here comes the magic part. We're going to start creating a bit more texture. So I've got some static grass fibres here, and I'm going to add those using some hairspray to fix it on initially. Going to give it a nice blast, covering the whole thing. This is just an initial fix. It's a good cheap way of using a glue fixative rather than an expensive varnish. You can just use a hairspray. So I'm going to give that a good coverage, and then just by hand, rather than using an applicator, I'm just going to sprinkle from distance these 2mm static grass fibres. These are going to create the initial bits of pine needles foliage. You don't need to put much on. It's a general aspect of less is more here. 1mm fibres might have been better off here, but I didn't have any to hand, so I'm using 2. But it's given a nice little representation of foliage here. So just put on a little bit at a time until you're happy with it. And at this point I can safely say that I think it's got enough foliage on, and it's time to give it a seal. Unfortunately you can't see what I'm doing here now, but what I'm going to do is give it a coating of gloss varnish, and that's the tree pretty much done. So all that remains to do now is just plant the tree into the hole that I've pre-prepared. Put a little bit of a brown patch in the grass ready to plant the tree. And there you can see the finished tree. Looks great in the garden, doesn't it? So we'll just have a quick look at that in its finished form. And that's pretty much the end of the video. So if you've liked what you've seen today and want to see some more tips, make sure you subscribe, maybe leave a comment, tell me what you think, and I'll see you again in the next video. Next time we're going to look at adding some creeping ivy to the side walls to further enhance this demo model. So see you again next time, and thanks for watching.